My sister laughed when I told her how much I make. She called it tiny, and she did it in front of Mom like I was a joke. That line is the beginning of the night that pulled the rug out from under me. It was a Saturday in June, warm, the kind of evening where neighbours brought folding chairs into their driveways and talked about bleachers and landscaping. We were at a backyard party for my cousin. My sister Erica arrived late with a new boyfriend and a new dress. She wore money the way some people wear perfume, so lightly it still announced itself. She'd been asking about my life, the usual, the school, the kids I tutor on the side, whether Mum had been keeping up with her pills. I answered as I always do, honest and plain. I told her my salary. I said the number and then added that I covered most of the household bills and that I worked extra weekends doing literacy classes. It was factual. It was not an invitation. Erica barked a laugh that cut the air. "That's tiny," she said, loud enough for my aunt 2 houses down to hear. Tiny? How do you afford mortgage and a car and, therapy? She smiled like she'd landed a clever line. Mom, who had Alzheimer's in the early stages and clung to anything that sounded decisive, smiled too and said, "Well, at least you're keeping busy," like a seal of approval. I felt my jaw tighten. That's who she was and why it hurt. She liked making value judgments at other people's expense, and she knew how to make a private thing public. The salary was mine to be proud of or ashamed of. Her word, once spoken in that tone, decided for me. It stung because I'd chosen the job for reasons that wouldn't make sense to her. It hurt because I'd been balancing bills and doctor's appointments and PTA fundraisers and still had managed quietly to save. We had been close as teenagers in a practical stopgap way. We still spoke on holidays and over Facebook, but our lives had diverged. She married someone with a corporate title and a glossy patience. She moved 2 hours away into a neighborhood with eclipsing privacy and immaculate hedges. She had a bigger paycheck, yes, and she liked the leverage of it. I lived in the same town where I grew up. I taught 2nd grade at Lincoln Elementary. I kept Mom's calendar and car keys and set up the pill organizer every Sunday. There was history between us, kind, small things that failed to translate into adulthood, and resentments that grew inside our family without ever getting labeled. There was a power imbalance, and it was simple. Erica had more money and more influence with Mum. She flew in on weekends and brought lunches that smelled expensive. She was the one who convinced Mom, in a soft but persistent way, that giving Erica the right to handle Mom's banking would be practical. "I'll check in on her," Erica said. "I'll make sure she doesn't get scammed." Mom, relieved at the thought of being helpful to both daughters, signed the papers in her living room with the television murmuring in the background. I didn't complain because I was living the practical life of a middle-class caregiver. I argued that Mum needed routines, not arguments. I argued that I had time to sit in doctors' waiting rooms. I argued that my salary, tiny or not, was steady. I argued that I'd keep Mum stable. There was always an argument in which Erica was the one to move the final piece on the board. She could spend money on a tile roof and call it maintenance. She could schedule the head nurse and call it diligence. I was the one who looked at receipts and balanced the checkbook in the evenings after lesson plans. The setup was this. Mom's house was a 3-bedroom bungalow on Maple Street. It had been in the family for 33 years. When my father died, Mom insisted on staying in the house because she liked the sunlight in the kitchen and the way the maple leaves hit the windows in late October. There was a mortgage, a property tax bill, and a small line of credit for the day when the furnace went out in January. And I had been paying some of the monthly utilities for a decade. Erica, who lived comfortably in another county, paid for the expensive repairs and insisted she be the one to sign checks larger than $2,000. There was no single dramatic moment that handed Erica authority. It was a steady erosion. It was the way she pushed forward inch by inch, taking over contact with the doctor, arranging for a caregiver who worked 3 afternoons a week, deciding that she would sell Mum's old car and give her a newer model because it would be safer. She made choices in front of Mum that felt like comforts. She did them quickly. She did them with a smile that suggested everyone would be grateful. I could not simply leave. I had a mortgage myself, a small house across town I shared with my cat, and a schedule at the school that wouldn't let me disappear. More importantly, Mum needed someone who would be there in the morning to make her breakfast and in the evening to help with the pills when the brand name changed. My salary was not just income, it bought continuity. I had a student loan, a credit union car loan, and a savings account that I'd promised myself never to touch except for emergencies. I didn't have the freedom to be petty. I had to be practical. So the first episode of escalation was small and intimate. The mocking, but the second came quicker than I expected. A week after the backyard laugh, I found out that Erica had arranged a meeting with the realtor. She's talking about selling the bungalow, my cousin told me in a text. She added an emoji, the kind that is trying to be neutral and failing. I went to Mum's kitchen and found Erica there with a printout of a real estate brochure. Erica had put a for buyers bookmark into an online listing and printed the photo. The house was a 30-minute drive away, a 2-story with a wraparound porch and an open-plan kitchen. "It's perfect," Erica said, telling Mum. "You won't have to climb stairs, that's the thing with these places, but this one has an elevator." Mum, who no longer always followed the details, nodded at the elevator. I was annoyed because no one had asked me. I asked Erica, calmly but firmly, "Who's paying for it?" She smiled and said, "We are. I'll take care of it. You know I can." That line, "I'll take care of it," was another kind of mockery. It told me she believed she could buy our way out of complexities and that we were both supposed to be grateful for the table she set. I had to push harder. I told her that if Mum wanted to move, we'd need to discuss the equity in the house and stewardship of the funds. I told her that the mortgage had been in Dad's name and that there were legal things to do. She brushed it aside, confident that she could manage the legal details the way she managed a calendar invite. From there, the escalation accelerated in small loops, each one worse than the last. First, Erica started controlling appointments. She would call the urologist directly and rebook Mom at times when I had parent-teacher conferences. She would arrive at Mom's with a check in hand and an implication. She was buying stability. I would come home from a long day and find a stack of receipts on the kitchen table. No explanation, just receipts and a different sense of ownership in the house. When I questioned her about a large withdrawal, $2,500 for a home safety upgrade, she said, "I told you. I paid for the ramp and the handrails. It's for Mom's safety." I trusted that she meant well, but the problem was that Mum's accounts were joint, and I had always been used to consulting my sister. When things started moving without consultation, I felt a pressure that wasn't only financial, it was moral. My sister was taking decisions into her hands and framing them as kindness. Kindness rarely comes with a checkbook. I reacted the way I always react, quietly and with paperwork. I went to the bank and printed statements. I made a spreadsheet. I tracked every large withdrawal, every transfer. I called the bank and asked whether, in fact, a power of attorney allowed Erica to withdraw funds without notification. The banker read the terms and said, "Yes, madam, power of attorney is broad." The word felt like a door slamming. Then the humiliation loop. Erica started bringing friends over to the house. Women from her yoga class, a real estate agent who looked at the paint and nodded with the approval of someone hunting for a profit. They would comment on the charm of the bungalow and whisper about how it could be an Airbnb. It was as if Erica was packaging our family history and selling it as product. She did not ask what I thought. She did not ask how Mom felt. Mom mostly smiled and said polite things. It felt like I had been removed from the conversation about my family's life. One escalation fed into the next. Erica began withholding information. She would schedule doctor's visits and not tell me the results. She would tell Mom that I was too busy to come on a Sunday. And then, when I showed up anyway, give me a look that said I was intruding. At family dinners, she would drop hints. "I'm looking at properties in the Heights," she'd say, loud enough for the table to hear, and then lean back and laugh. "A lot of people think they need more space." The implication was always that I was behind, stuck, not upgraded. Financial pressure followed. Because Erica had legal access to Mum's accounts, she started moving money. Small amounts at first, hundreds here, 1,000 there, labelled as care expenses. I argued and asked questions and was given short, vaguely impatient answers. The checks that used to be made out to the grocery store were now made to companies I'd never heard of. When I asked for the invoices, Erica said they were in a folder for taxes. The house was becoming a ledger with pages missing. The situation got worse when Erica suggested that Mum should sign over the deed. She said it as if the deed were a suitcase that would be easier to carry. She told Mom, "If you sign now, we can avoid the probate when the time comes." Mum, who feared the scribbles of a court, nodded. I asked to speak with Mom privately. She looked at me as if I'd asked for something impertinent. "Erica will take care of it," she said. That phrase landed again, heavy and final. I tried to find leverage. I spoke to a lawyer, an hour consultation paid out of my own pocket, who told me that unless there was clear elder abuse or financial exploitation, it could be hard to undo transfers that Mom had authorized. The lawyer suggested we document everything and, if necessary, file an action. The lawyer also said that if Mum was still competent and there were limits to what we could force her to do, it was the most discouraging kind of advice, legal accuracy wrapped in bureaucratic impotence. At work, the stress showed in small ways. I took a bathroom break where I cried for 5 minutes and came back to supervise a reading group as if nothing were wrong. I sold some of the quilts I make at craft fairs online for extra cash. I took on Saturday tutoring sessions. I did what I had always done in this life, make more with the little I had and keep the engines running. The situation grew darker when the first meaningful thing was taken. Erica sold the car that had been Dad's and used some of the proceeds to put a down payment on a condo 3 towns over. She told Mum it would be an investment. She told me she'd be near and that it would make visiting easier. The car was a different kind of loss, the sentimental kind. I had loved that car. I had a memory of Dad picking me up in it on rainy days. It was small, but it felt like a removal of history. The low point arrived quietly. It was not a cinematic moment, it was a slow thinning of air. 1 month, I came home from school to find an eviction notice taped to my front door. It was not for my house, my mortgage was current, but for the small apartment I had rented out to a student to help with bills. The student had been living in it rent-free for a week because my trust account had been drained by unauthorized transfers that left me short by $350 at the credit union. The bank had applied an overdraft fee to my account that, unpaid, rippled through my other bills. The notice explained it in legal, neutral language, failure to pay utilities. The landlord had no patience for a teacher whose salary he believed to be tiny. I called him and begged, and he said, "I can't afford to wait. People who make it on time make it on time." He was right. I had failed a basic contract. That moment, when I had to call the student and tell her she needed to move out, was the low point. It wasn't dramatic. There were no raised voices. There was a small, heavy personal failure. I felt trapped and abandoned. My sister had the power to call the shots and to make decisions that affected my life. She held the purse strings of Mum's finances and a moral high ground. I had lost leverage. I had no legal foothold, and I felt the world narrowing to a series of missed payments and glossy smiles. And then a small, accidental thing happened that altered the axis of the family, a turning point that had the odd quality of being both trivial and decisive. It was an email. Erica was working with a realtor named Mark. I had never heard of Mark, but he popped up on my feed because our families overlapped in social circles. Mark was the kind of realtor who used words like up-and-coming neighborhood and open plan resale. The seller of the house Erica wanted, the 2-story with a porch, was a woman named Janice, who lived in a different part of town. I checked the listing twice because it looked like something pushed at the edge of possibility. Erica had mentioned it at dinner, casual and certain. I assumed she'd have the advantage. One evening I was at Mom's filling out a grocery list when an email notification landed on her kitchen table. It was Mark, and my name was on it in the to field. He had meant to send the email to Erica, but had mistakenly typed my email handle, which in my family name was painfully obvious. What was in the email was not a sales pitch or a photo of granite counters. It was an offer summary from Janice's seller packet. It said simply that Erica's offer was contingent upon the sale of her condo in Bellwood. It also listed the closing date as 60 days out. It was a small formal document, the kind that realtors send across the table to confirm terms. It was not meant for me. It was a clerical mistake. I read it again. The contingency meant that if someone offered cash or a firm financing package without that contingency, the seller could accept the new offer. The closing date was far enough away that our other buyer could step in and close sooner. That was the mistake that changed everything. Erica's offer was not unassailable. Erica had assumed her money and her presence gave her entitlement. In fact, the offer had a clear weakness. It was, in plain language, beatable. I held the email for a long minute. My reaction was not vengeful. It was a calculation mixed with a tired, dull relief. I understood how this could be used. An all-cash offer or a faster close could displace Erica. But I also understood that using the information would be mean. I sat down and considered what justice looked like for me. I had been humiliated and pushed aside. I had been paying for things I had no say over. I had been quietly saving for years, thread by thread, side gig by side gig. I had a small stock portfolio. I had sold a small condo some years back that Dad's brother had left me. The money was not flashy. No one in my family knew the exact number. I had never told Erica. That night, I made a decision that was deliberate and careful, not dramatic. I called my broker and asked for a liquidity report. I transferred funds into a new account set up in the name of an LLC. I called a title attorney I trusted, someone who'd handled a contract for me years ago when I'd sold that condo. I told the attorney I was interested in acquiring a property quietly, as a personal investment. We talked about anonymity, about speed, about what sellers preferred. The attorney reminded me that purchases were public record and that secret ownership could be kept discreet initially through an LLC, a common practice for investors who preferred privacy. Here is what I did not do. I did not write Erica a letter or make a show of power. I did not send her a message that said, "Remember when you mocked my salary?" I did not parade the purchase on social media. The purchase itself was quiet and practical. I made an offer through the attorney in the LLC name. I offered a firm contract with a 30-day closing and no contingencies beyond basic inspections. I offered an earnest money deposit that was serious. I did the kind of work that I had always done in the background: numbers, patience, and steady, boring competence. The seller accepted. When I signed the documents, I felt a wash of things. Shame, yes, because it had become a power play. Relief because I had moved the lines of the board. Guilt because I had surprised my mother and removed a potential dream from my sister. It was not a triumphant moment. It was quiet. I bought the house because I could. I bought it because an accidental email had shown me that my sister's approach had a structural weakness. I bought it because I had been strategic for years in ways that were not visible to those who judged me for my paycheck. After the purchase, the consequences were immediate and practical. Mark called Erica to tell her the seller had accepted another offer. Erica called Mom and left a voice message that was equal parts furious and wounded. She posted a photo of the neighborhood on her feed with a caption about not getting everything you want. She called our cousin and suggested that perhaps I had interfered. There were immediate small ruptures, family group chats filled with clipped texts. Aunt Paula asked if there could be a misunderstanding. Our cousin sided with Erica at first, telling Mum that maybe she should have been more open about plans. Mum, in the confusion, said, "I didn't know," and sat down for a long time with a hand to her forehead. What I had expected and what actually happened were different. I had imagined that Erica would hatch a scheme, that she would sue or threaten. In reality, she reacted with a cold fury and public contempt. The worst was not legal action. It was the devastation in her voice when she called me. 2 nights after closing, when she finally got me on the phone. "How could you?" she asked. Very little else. She had a tremor in her words that showed she felt betrayed in the way that people who perceive entitlement do. Deeply, personally, and with righteous indignation. There were practical outcomes. Erica did not sue. Suing would have drawn attention and expense. She tried to negotiate. She offered me a price above what I paid. I listened and declined. I was not interested in making money off her misfortune as an exercise. I was interested in reclaiming the small island of dignity that she had taken. I offered her something else, the chance to rent the house at market rate for a year if she wanted to relocate temporarily. She refused. She refused quietly and angrily. Instead, she moved into a friend's condo 2 towns over and posted photos of late-night cocktails and thrift store art as if she were unbothered. At home, the world rearranged itself. Mum stopped trusting Erica's financial judgment in the same way. There were long conversations about authority. Mum asked to see the bank statements. Erica, who had been used to steering the ship, found that people now asked for receipts. Our cousin suggested family mediation. My lawyer friend suggested we draw up a new stewardship plan for Mum. I suggested we close the joint accounts and draw up a trust that would be managed by a neutral third party. It was dull and sensible work. It felt like cleaning a wound. Emotionally, the aftermath was complicated. My sister and I stopped speaking for months. The calls were terse and then stopped. My family took sides in small, awkward ways. Some people thought I'd stolen from Erica. Some thought I had stood up for myself. My friends had opinions. The neighborhood had opinions. I had discomforting sympathy from people who said, "You did what you had to do," with their voices making the phrase an absolution and also a question. The real consequence that mattered to me did not involve the title or the deed. It involved Mum. When it became clear that Erica would not be the person in Mum's bank account any longer, Mum, in moments of clarity, asked me simply, "Are you angry?" I told her the truth. Sometimes. More often, I said, I was tired. She reached across the table and took my hand and squeezed it the way only an old person can, pressing with the memory of everything. "You did right," she said earnestly. And then, shy, "You always did." That was not absolution or a moral statement. It was a private blessing. It did not make the family whole. Time passed. The house I had bought became a quiet presence in my life. I did not move into it full time. I had my own small place. I used the property as an investment and a refuge. Sometimes I stayed there for a night to change my scenery. It was odd to be in a house purchased because of a family bruise. The first time I sat at the kitchen table alone with a cup of coffee and the early light pushing through the curtains, I cried. Not from victory, from the weight of what had been traded. Erica's life changed in ways that were not satisfying and not punitive. She took a job transfer to another city, one with more visible prestige. She posted images of interviews as if the world was an uninterrupted runway. I heard through the family grapevine that her marriage had become frayed. We both lost something. She lost the sense that she could dominate outcomes by throwing checks at them. I lost the uncomplicated illusion that standing up to family would be admired rather than resented. The house purchase did not make everything right. It shifted responsibility. There were legal cleanups. We redrew Mum's estate plan. We set up a small trust that had clear language about who could serve as trustee and clear safeguards for certain kinds of transfers. We hired a professional fiduciary. Money matters became less personal and more contractual. It was disappointing in a way. Money had become the language we used most fluently and also the language that caused us the most harm. Turning it into contract felt antiseptic, but also safe. There was a quieter consequence that I did not anticipate, an emotional recalibration. I had spent most of my life apologizing for not being flashy. I had been the woman who made lunches and drove carpools and stitched quilts for school raffles. In buying that house, and I did not become the woman I'd always pretended to be. I became someone slightly more visible. I learned that being small in some contexts did not mean being powerless in all contexts. It also taught me that power felt heavy. The payoff was practical and complicated. I used the equity and some of the rental income from the new property to help pay for a better caregiver schedule for Mom, to pay down my small debts, and to put aside a fund for unexpected hospital bills. I did not buy the house to spite Erica. I bought it because unexpectedly it granted me the leverage I needed to make better choices for Mum and for myself. In the end, action, boring, financial action, mattered more than speeches. Family dynamics adjusted to the new reality. Some people came by to say quiet congratulations when they found out the truth. Some people never spoke to me again. I learned how thin the line is between assertiveness and aggression in family stories. Months after the purchase, my sister and I sat across from each other at Mom's kitchen table. We both had the weariness of people who had been in a long fight. We didn't make grand speeches. There was no cinematic reconciliation. We spoke about schedules and Medicare. We spoke about small practicalities. Who would drive Mum to the dentist? Who would bring homemade soup when she had a cold? There were brief apologies, measured and careful. There was also an acceptance that we would probably never be the people we had been in our 20s. The house was ours in the sense that it had altered how we moved in the world. It had consequences that neither of us could fully control. Now, when I think about that night at the backyard party, I don't think about the laugh first. I think about the small acts that followed, the spreadsheet, the lawyer's brief, the email accidentally sent. I think about how people who wield power often do it by making kindness the instrument of control. I think about how small savings, quietly kept, can be like a river with a slow but steady current that, given a mistake or an opening, can move mountains. I am not telling this story to boast. I am telling it because the world is composed of quiet people doing exacting work, and because family conflict often comes dressed as care. I am not saying anyone was wholly right or wrong. I am saying that the truth lived in the documents and the quiet decisions as much as in the loud accusations. I am saying that when someone minimizes you publicly, it can be more than a humiliation. It can be a pivot. Sometimes you respond by speaking louder. Sometimes you respond by doing the math. If you stayed this long, thank you for listening. If you like the story, please leave a like. If you want to hear more, if you want to subscribe for more stories from my life, click subscribe. And if you've ever had a family fight that began with money or a quiet betrayal, tell me in the comments. I read them.